I don't mean to be glib, but shooting a CEO of a healthcare company in the back, assassination style, in front of cameras is a solid way, certainly, to start a public debate. It's not the best way. That man had a family, and people depended on him. But we, the public, are thinking and talking about our healthcare system, this podcast included. Now, as usual, I think we missed the news cycle a little bit, but that's because we were working on a solution that will fix everything. I'm going to share that with you over the next 3 episodes. Joe, you are more than welcome to come along for the ride.
I'm excited. You're going to fix it all.
Yeah. But in this episode, I want to convince you that there is a massive business opportunity to disrupt the entire healthcare system, but only for those who are willing to get their hands a little dirty. Part 2, the next episode, is going to detail the business model. So how can we align corporate profit with their clients' overall health? And then finally, I'm going to present the business plan, which will show how to go from zero to the finalized business model. But first, just a little bit more context. This podcast focuses on finance, government expenditures, macroeconomics, things like that. So to connect the thread between sort of what we typically cover and the healthcare system, I wanted to reference this slide, which is copied directly from our own episode 3. Specifically on the graph on the left, just to describe it real quick, we have the government expenditures as a percentage of US GDP on the y-axis. And then on the x-axis, we have time. And then this line in the middle, it separates the historical from the projected. Now, the key point here that I want to make is that Medicaid and Medicare are the 2 expenses which are consistently growing as a percentage of GDP. So, and I think we made this point back in episode 3, but you can see that defense sometimes, expands out, like in the 1980s, for instance, or right after the 2000s. But that kind of since has gone down. Eyeballing it, contrast that with what's happening with Medicaid and Medicare. They just seem to be thin and ever growing. So besides solving the social complaint that the healthcare system is overpriced and people are potentially dying or otherwise not having access to healthcare, there's also a governmental fiscal angle to lowering healthcare costs. If you don't lower it, you might bankrupt the country. Now, admittedly, Luigi's outrage over the system is probably not because he was concerned about bankrupting the U.S., but that is a real concern if these trends continue, and something has to push back on this. And people have. I'm not the first one to think about this, obviously. I wanted to start with kind of what the other solutions are out there, and then I'm going to try to explain to you why I think they're bad. So let's, for the first one, the Affordable Care Act, also called Obamacare, basically described as broader insurance coverage. Now, the problem with this that I have, first off, it's feeding into the problem system. It's not solving it. So this is not a solution to rising costs. If anything, it could just add more fuel to the raging fire that is out of control healthcare costs, because there is now a larger capital pool from which the medical industry can pull from. Like the system, I think, needs to fundamentally be rethought, and I'll show why in a moment. The second reason why I think the Obamacare idea, or just kind of more insurance, might be an issue. There's almost a moral or human value system that is busted here. I think that the current insurance system now is that healthy people are covering for sick people's medical bill. Now, it feels unfair because people's health and health expense is not entirely a function of luck, which is what I think insurance is supposed to cover. It doesn't feel like an appropriate redistribution of risk. And I'll try to get into a little bit more as to what kind of constitutes someone's health and what it's a function of. It's not 100% luck. The second thing that I've listed here, the Medicare or Medicaid for all, or the single payer systems. So, think Canada, think like Bernie Sanders. But like some of the problems for this one for me is we are still paying for it. It is just in the form of taxes. Another one is the lack of competition. There is a huge incentive for innovation in a system that I'm going to try to propose. But then number 3, and maybe the most significant problem, is the practical one in the United States. I don't think we have the political capacity of eliminating the entire medical insurance industry. It is simply too powerful for the government to get rid of. However, I do think there is a force that can get rid of it, or at least change it materially enough so that it could serve its initial purpose and everyone would be happy for it. And I'll get that in the next slide. But first, quickly go over some of the other fixes. Some said that they should make insurance nonprofit, which might help, but I don't think it would necessarily solve it. The costs are not entirely a function of profit, I think, but also laziness. I think there's little incentive to cut costs, frankly, in the system. And I'm not entirely sold that having a nonprofit in the mix, even for insurance, would cut costs a whole lot. And then kind of just to touch upon this last one with the price transparency, maybe that would help. Or almost certainly it would help. Certainly, or I would hope to think that it would draw a lot of attention to sort of what is going on here. And I think it would make the job of someone who wanted to enter into the conversation and potentially disrupt the healthcare system would be much clearer as to how to do that. But I think without the replacement model, I don't think we're going to get to a place where everyone would be happy.
Sorry, what do you mean by replacement model?
Yeah, so I'm going to, in the next episode, try to come up with fundamentally different healthcare system, and I'm going to do it on the back of a company. So I'm gonna suggest a business model in the that would essentially take over the healthcare system in a way. It would provide everything the healthcare system currently does. It would do it in such a way that it would align a corporate profit with the client's health, which I do not think is really properly aligned. So, you'll notice that all of these solutions also they're government directed, which I think is a mistake. I think that if we want to fight something this big, we need something more powerful than the government. And that is it's capitalism. It's capitalism.
That's it. That's the American way.
It's the only way. The promise of fat returns on a for-profit company, the offering of a better product for cheaper that employers and their employees will choose over the current option.
Need those incentives.
Those incentives, yeah. It's all incentives. Capitalism kind of allows for something like that to happen. And happen, in my opinion, it must. I think we need to rebuild the healthcare system from the ground up, make it a profit-seeking venture, and make sure to align the client's health with the health of the company. First, let me just articulate the business opportunity that I see here, if they're not obvious already. So first off, just costs. You could think many great companies are built. So think Apple with the personal computer initially. I understand now they're considered expensive, but initially they were thought of bringing the personal computer to everyone. Another company, SpaceX, Amazon with everything, Ford, the automobile, IKEA with furniture, and even Harry's, which I am I'm a proud customer of, but I've not used for a couple days here. And these great companies, what they do is they increase wealth, and to increase wealth is by making something cheaper. So Ford increased wealth in this country by lowering the amount of effort and input needed to make a car. He made the factory, and now the automobile is accessible and affordable. That is the capitalist way. And I think we have to do the same thing with healthcare. I wanted to also, I'll share like a personal anecdote too for this one. So last year, so for 2024, so this would have been at the end of 2023 when we were coming up with, what insurance that you wanted for 24, our family moved over to an HSA account. So a health savings account. So I'll be open here. So I pay about, it's like $450 per paycheck to get me, my wife and two kids covered by insurance. In the past, I'd pay that to 100% to insurance, and then I would get things like sick visits, say for like an ear infection or something covered. Now what I decided to do for 2024 is I'll still pay the $450 each paycheck, but about 130 of that goes into a separate debit card. That's the HSA account where it can be used on sick visits or at CVS for prescriptions or a bunch of other stuff.
Triple tax advantage.
Yeah, it's tax advantaged, right? Exactly. So that's kind of that's the kicker. But that also means that I'm getting medical bills. Like, before I didn't really look so super closely at them. But now when my son gets sick, and kids get sick a lot, we go to the doctor, he'd have a fever or something, and they'd offer up a bunch of tests. One of the tests, they would say, hey, do you want to check for COVID? Do you want to check for flu? And I would say, sure. Yes, I did. And then in the bill that showed up, I think the COVID test was $150, I think. And the flu was $90, both of which that we had enough saved in the HSA account. But that test literally took 5 minutes. Like they took it, they swabbed his nose, with two
And that
separate
same test over the counter is like $20.
Yeah,
It's a
and
pharmacy.
and we had the results before we left.
It's not specialized equipment.
So
It doesn't
it's
require
like
specialized
really.
labor.
I mean, they're going to charge us over $200 for these 5-minute tests, and they can, and that's I think part of the problem. So now this kind of has some messed up incentives now, because when my son gets sick now, I don't ask to get the COVID one done. Typically, no one in my family has gotten COVID. Knock on wood. It's just I've been super lucky maybe in that case. But getting these bills, we could easily pay $300 for a 30-minute sick visit. And the conclusion that they get to is, just drink lots of water and get rest and stuff, So, I'm going to question, can I undercut that test on cost? I think I can. I mean, like, come on. And it's not like the whole internet isn't filled with other examples like this that are just much more egregious. This NPR one is I think kind of interesting. It's about ambulances. And as I was looking into this, I had no idea, but ambulances are a huge percentage of like all the expenses that we pay. They're nuts.
Really?
And then, you can go over and just see these itemized bills. So,
Yeah, a lot of that rage bait about the healthcare system.
It's real, man. I mean, I just gave you a personal anecdote. I would, encourage you to go find your own. We just kind of accept it. It's just normal. It doesn't have to be like this. We have just been conditioned to accept that these costs are what they are. And I'll explain in a bit. Like I'm calling it the healthcare squeeze. It's just, there's nothing you can do about it. I'm going to show you like a made up invoice.
Yeah. It's like looking at that center one, like that, like,
that's what they look like.
Maybe the line items are true, but those prices, certainly those Aetna payments at the bottom, it just seems completely fabricated just to say, all right, make them pay $500.
So kind of digging into the cost opportunity a little bit more. So the Wall Street Journal recently came out with a few articles here, no doubt in response to Luigi kicking up the discussion again. The numbers are insane. So like, never mind the $450 that I pay. I wanted to know what my employer pays on top of that. So we're not even really even factoring in the full cost here. This is just taken out of my paycheck, let alone what the additional, whatever, my employer is doing. They pay into the HSA account, for example. So, I mean, if you look at this graph on the left here, the average animal contributions to premiums for family coverage is $25,000. So from the perspective of a business, like a business opportunity, the question becomes, can a company provide, quote unquote, health to a family for less than $25,000 a year on average? On average, Joe. So this is including healthy families.
Right.
And that includes like catastrophic coverage.
And just looking at this chart, 2000 was that $6,000?
Yeah.
That's an obscene growth. Like the prices multiplied fourfold or more.
Yeah.
In 25 years. Paychecks haven't gone up that much.
No. And they can do it. Like there's just the hold that the combination of, and I'll get into this with the healthcare squeeze thing concept that I'm going to try to present in a bit. But the hold that the combination of insurance and the kind of the medical, I'm calling establishment have is very powerful. But like, from going back to like a business is like, could a business provide that for like half the cost? I think it's possible. And if you could do that, then you're generating an incredible amount of wealth. Like that's the opportunity. So let me give you another anecdote, kind of from this article up here. These anecdotes are always interesting. I'll just read the first two paragraphs from the article. So that's over here. So let me just read the first two paragraphs here. Tim Ebble's visit with an ear, nose, and throat specialist at an Ohio clinic last October came to $348. At the same time, he got a second bill for $645. The hospital system that owns the Avon, Ohio clinic had charged him separately for the use of the office where he met his physician. It is what is known as a facility fee, which included overhead for the system's hospitals, though Ebel hadn't set foot in one.
Wow, so he didn't even go to the hospital. He just went to some doctor's office and he got charged for a hospital.
Yeah. So people I think are getting gutted.
And like, was that 645? Like, did it say which was which? Like, which was the facility fee? Because it said it was overhead. Like,
it said the hospital system that owns the Avon, Ohio clinic had charged him separately. I think that was the second bill. So I think the 645 was the separate bill. Was for the office. So he went,
so
I guess, and met his physician.
Like twice the cost of the medical care you receive is straight overhead. Like, what is that? Where is all that overhead?
It's not. When you start to look into it, it just feels really wrong. I asked Google Gemini actually to come up with some common medical procedures and then their average cost and the number of those procedures that are done per month in the United States. And it came up with this table, and I could put that table into a graph. So in this graph here, I have the estimated monthly frequency of these different procedures, and then I have the average cost. This is important for the business plan. That's why it's in here. But I think this also gives us a good sense of there's estimated market size. And, and then just the cost. Like, what are we going to try to beat here? So can we do a knee replacement for less than the price of a new Tesla Model Y? Is there the same amount of effort that goes into making a beast mode Cybertruck as there is in a spinal fusion, just in terms of like the physical amount of work? Are there any laws of physics being broken by being able to do this cheaper? I just don't believe that we can't do these for something that costs less. And then just taking a look at the market sizes, we're looking at $35,000, and there's like 58,000 of these. I think I saw online that there was like 700,000 of these done a year. Roughly call it 58,000 of them a month at that price. We're talking about a market of about $2 billion a month, 24 billion just for this one surgery. Here's spinal, the 4 billion a month in market size. I mean, if that's not like,
Yeah, those are really large markets. It's difficult for me to judge what these prices are because these are all surgical procedures, right?
Yeah.
Like those seem far more inaccessible to approach from, I don't know.
They have to be done.
Like at least I know what you're thinking. Earlier examples.
Exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. This is I'm sort of pulling down a little bit of a slide from the business plan, but I think it just has to. You have to provide the
put
service.
Some numbers on it. Yeah,
you just have to do it. You can't enter.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's why we have doctors, but you would have to. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to.
You got to undercut it, and I think there are ways. I think there are ways. Right, opportunity 2.
I like that suit.
Opportunity 2. Yeah, this is AI generated here.
It's
the demand.
Get a little hard to tell.
Right? It's really good.
It's really good, and it's like he's got the look, and I could
look
just totally
into those
see him walking
eyes
around.
And tell me you don't know what he's thinking. Tell me,
you look at our groceries, red dye number 3, and everything.
Everything, yeah. But look, I mean, I'm not going to linger on this one. I only got one slide for this guy. Unmet demand. I'm going to go ahead and say that everyone needs good health, and that demand is not being met in the U.S. I mean, without showing you any statistics for how unhealthy Americans are, I'm just going to go and ask you to look into his eyes and try to be aware that there is a Maha movement, for goodness sakes. A whole movement, Joe. based around. He tried to get elected because we were so unhealthy.
Right.
And so if I were to just put a finger into the air, check the winds, I think it's fair to say that some people feel as though Americans are not very healthy.
Absolutely.
All
Yeah, I
right.
mean it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of approach he tries to take. Like, does he just try to instill or create new regulation to, you can't use these dyes anymore, or what have you, or like I wonder if he does something try to kind of like you're suggesting, a little more structural to the how the market itself works.
Yeah, one of the things he proposed that I thought was quite interesting was making it illegal for the pharmaceutical companies to advertise on television or just in media in general. And what they wanted to do was just to split again incentives that the media currently has with um, portraying their primary customer as anything but great. So like, just
Right.
separate the economic incentive. So make it so that the media is not reliant on the advertising dollars from big pharma or whatever. And then the media can
Right.
do its job and take a really, really hard look into these companies. That was like one of the things he proposed. And again, it's from the perspective of, yes, it's from the government thing, but it's attacking incentives, which makes sense to me. Um, Still though, I think capitalism is the best. Um, I'm going to move on to opportunity number 3, public support. So maybe this isn't a pure business opportunity in sort of the classic economic sense, but I'm going to put it up here anyway. I think people want to see the business that I'm going to try to propose next episode succeed. I think there's a hunger for a new approach out there. The masses, so to speak, would be rooting for you. Um, and what you say is going on here. I mean, there's a certain amount of exploitation that people sense. Um, some of these are pretty good. Medicare for all would abolish private insurance. There's no precedent in American history. And, somebody wrote, oh no, my beloved private insurance, which increases 10 to 20% every year, costs more than my mortgage did, and doesn't cover anything until I paid $13,000 first. I kind of like this one over here. Just, I need this treatment in order to live. Am I covered? And it's just like the insurance. Gladiator, thumb up or thumb down. It's for them to decide. So I'm going to try to explain in what I'm calling the healthcare squeeze, which is just kind of dovetailing off of this, which is why people are so sort of fed up and why I think this has to be rethought. So just in a traditionally, well-functioning market, let's say for toys, your business is basically with the toy manufacturer. Sure, there's a retailer in between, but the dynamic still works. You give the toy maker money, and they give you a toy. If you don't like the toy, that they are offering to sell you, you can go somewhere else, and they force them to make a better toy. Okay, simple enough. We're all familiar with it. Now, that I do not think, I'm going to try to argue that is not the case in the medical industry. I'm going to draw a parallel here between the current model of healthcare and that of government. So, one of the, I think, brilliant things that happened with taxes had to do with having the employer pay it. So it's not like at the end of every year we, calculate what we owe in taxes and then sign a check for $30,000 or whatever. So let's say you got the middle class or whatever, making over 100,000 a year. You don't see come April, they're all cutting checks for $30,000 or whatever. It just comes directly out of your paycheck. You don't even get to handle the money. And from like a human, I think, psychology perspective, it's absolutely brilliant because there's a huge difference between you never having the money, never seeing it in your bank account to begin with, and like actively handing it over. So that's kind of what I'm depicting here in this first step here. So you got the employer, and there's some money that goes to Joe in his paycheck, and then a chunk of it that goes to the government as tax. And the government does a bunch of stuff with it. Maybe they have their own departments that do this, their own employees. Maybe they have contractors or service providers that they pay, and then they give Joe the service. Now, similarly, I don't see the money that goes to insurance. It never gets into my wallet. It's just there's a premium that's taken out of my paycheck, and it just goes straight to insurance. And they sit on a big load of money. Now the thing is, though, insurance. Yes, it's called insurance, but I'm going to argue that it's not insurance. I don't. It's not like flood or fire insurance. I think it is a lie of a name, because the insurance as we know it is designed to cover, just some sort of catastrophic event that you don't know whether it's going to happen or not. But insurance today, it covers all your medical costs, even ones that you're going to have. So like I have to go to the doctor every year, and for some reason insurance is paying for that. Why is insurance paying for that? I
It really seems against the whole
that
idea of insurance.
you're breaking like kind of the fundamental market dynamic here. And I think, like I have my children, they have to go to these checkups. We know they're coming. It is very predictable. There's no reason for something like quote unquote insurance to cover something that my daughter's 15-month checkup has to do. I think all that does is mess up the market dynamics, and it allows healthcare providers to start charging high prices for stuff that we don't really need. I mean, the key thing here is that we have a pay for service model, right? So this kind of incentivizes healthcare providers to start charging you for stuff that you don't necessarily need. Right? We do not have an outcomes based approach. We don't have a pay for outcomes. Now, healthcare providers are looking at this, bunch of money that has been collected by insurance, and I think they see it as roughly fair game. And then, meanwhile, the insurance companies, they point to the medical healthcare providers and say, "Look, we're raising our premiums because they're raising their prices," and it just goes on like this as clockwork. How it's supposed to work is as an industry or a product matures, it should get cheaper, not more expensive. But we are seeing everything get more expensive. And then what's worse is that whatever is not covered by insurance, it comes back to you, Joe, in the form of an invoice. So let's go ahead and take a look at what these invoices say.
Here we go.
All right. So, here's a pretty basic form. We got healthcare hospital, subsidiary of Tender Love and Care Industries. It looks like sent to you on
so
Christmas.
Nice.
So nice. They're so sweet. They're just looking out for you, Joe. Sent to James Jimmy Sucker at 159 whatever lane. Let's take a look at what his invoice says. Okay, COVID test 150. I've been there. Flu test. FLUE 80.
Oh, you wanted a influenza test?
Yeah. Whoops. Come on.
We
back.
gave you a flu test.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with the blue test.
So there's a ibuprofen pill, $15. So that's a real thing. I heard about that.
Wow.
I don't know. There was some like basic medical procedure, and the nurse asked if he wanted a Tylenol, and he was like, "Sure." And then they itemized them for $15 for a single pill.
That's absurd.
Here we go. We have an unneeded test, but just to be 100% sure, that's $80. Then we have the, what are you going to do about it fee? Over $1,100. Change your hospital or something. Try it. Won't change anything. All right, that's a fee. Insurance premiums are the same regardless of the provider fee. We bill them, you dumb fee. And then a subtotal.
That's what it feels like.
Cool, 25. This is what it feels like to me, man. And then you got the insurance, right? And they go ahead and say, "You have no idea how we decide on this. It's up to us." Sorry.
Yeah, that's just the absurd thing. Like, where do those
what
numbers
you
come
still
from?
owe, and you're like, "Oh wow, look at this number and look at this number. Thank God for insurance."
Oh, that's great.
That's what you say. That's what you say.
Right.
And then we hear, "Thank you for your business, and we hope you feel better soon. Merry Christmas." So, I mean, I've been here. I've seen stuff like this. It's on the internet. And just people feel like there's just like, it's this part right here that's just insulting. It's just like, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it, Joe? What are you going to do?
Just don't pay it.
Yeah, right.
That's like the best you can do nowadays. It's like you answer absurdity with absurdity. and that's not a great formula to make the system better.
No. So it has to be rethought. And I think the bottom line here today, I think costs today are outrageous. I think the opportunity here is that many great companies are built from lowering costs. I think there are misaligned incentives that are really designed to extract more money collectively, but do not necessarily lead to overall health. A fee for service is not going to work here. I think the general public is not enamored by the current system. And I think it can be done. So I'm going to show you that on the next episode. But first, because like it can't kind of not be explored. We are not the first ones to try something like this. So I want to tell you the story of Qliance. So, they were, arguably kind of semi-successful. I think they ended up being acquired by the Multicare Health System after operating for 10 years. I think they were based out of Seattle, I think. They sort of described themselves as a concierge healthcare for the middle class. And what their model was, they charged between, I guess, $50 to $130 a month, depending on the age. So all of this is super, super helpful when you actually try to design like a business plan or a business model, just to kind of get a sense of what's possible. And, typically one doctor or a doctor here had about 800 patients. And what they said in this article that I found, again, article is going to be in the presentation, which we'll link to. But they said that was about a third of the number they would have had with insurance. Now, if you were to ask me how many patients like a typical doctor has, I would not have thought it would have been like 2,400. I would have guessed something much less, but there you have it. Now, what they offered was, with this fee, they offered preventative care, tests, advice, some chronic condition treatment, and simple emergencies, so like stitches and x-rays. Now, so that's kind of where they kind of fell in the broader overall market. But clients still needed to have prescriptions. They still needed to, I guess, pay for specialists. I think they still had a separate thing for insurance for like hospital expenses. It did not succeed. I think they had to close. And according to this article, I think they were quoted saying they ran into overwhelming financial difficulties and was unable to continue. And when I wanted to figure out what exactly that was, they said it was related to lender fraud. So I don't know if it was a complete failure of the model, or there was some sort of shenanigans going on with fraud.
What does lender fraud mean exactly?
So I think somebody who issued them or gave them money had like withdrawn it privately from their account. So they had a whole big stack of bills in their business, in their bank account, and then it was taken out.
That's quite strange.
It is a little strange.
They didn't fail. They were just kneecapped in some way.
Yeah. I think
from an insurance company, I bet.
Yeah. I think they mentioned something about being like a bank or loan or something. It wasn't totally clear, but I think the fact that they survived for 10 years suggests that this seems possible. But if I were to find a fault in it, I think it wasn't necessarily bold enough. I don't think you can tippy toe into something like this. They were still subject to incredible cost pressures, kind of all around. You can't just, I think, and what I sort of touch upon in what I think the business model is, you got to be quite vertical. You got to take over any place that's going to be being taken advantage of you, which is a huge swath of the system. I think you need to provide all services. I think you need to provide insurance, proper insurance, and they didn't do that. Another one I wanted to talk about was the One Medical. This one I don't really have too much to say because it doesn't quite fit, but I still wanted to mention it. It was recently acquired by Amazon for $3.9 billion. And I sort of mentioned it because they had a membership fee of a certain amount a year that sort of gave their clients a little bit better service. So they're a little faster with some things, but they still had to pay with insurance. They still had, they still had to go through the insurance system. I didn't think it was a major disruptor. I think it mostly fit in pretty well, despite maybe all the claims they have to offering better service. I don't think it would necessarily fit the system and necessarily fix the system.
It sounds like just an additional step.
Yeah, it just seems like everything else plus a membership fee.
It's like what do you get with that fee?
The, um, what do you get with that fee? I think they described it. What I could find was like
Doctors have
they
fewer
had next day
patients.
appointments more frequently. It's just you didn't have to, now in some cases you got to wait a couple months or something to get an appointment. This you could do it more or the next day or something. Maybe they just had fewer clients or something. Haven. This one's interesting. This is one I did kind of know about. So I don't know if you remember, but this is like the Buffett Bezos diamond from Berkshire, Amazon, J.P. Morgan, the nonprofit venture. Do you remember about that? They caused a bit of a commotion when they announced it. I think there was some movement in some of the healthcare company stock prices and stuff. They thought, oh, we're going to look at all these huge names. They're going to fix healthcare. Well, it shut down after 3 years. I guess it shut down in February 2021. The CEO and COO, I guess, left within the first year. They say that the original goal was to, quote, provide U.S. employees and their families with simplified, high quality, and transparent healthcare at a reasonable cost. Now, I was trying to figure out exactly like what they did and what happened, and the closest I can get were a couple news articles. So CNBC argued the reason why they failed what had to do with each of the founding companies. So those three that I mentioned, they were all trying to execute their different projects like separately. It's like, okay, fine. The Harvard Business School went into a little bit more depth. One of the reasons they said was insufficient market power. And they were pulling some quotes from kind of the original founders or investors at the time. But they said that they didn't have enough pressure from the demand side to swing prices. And the LA Times seems to have supported that. I mean, this seems, if this really was their strategy, was just to say, look, we're going to demand better prices because we just have so many customers. I don't know. Like that doesn't, I guess they just didn't have enough. I guess didn't have enough clients.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is a fundamental issue of the current system in general because it's so fragmented. No individual entity really has all that much pricing power.
Even
So
the
you just
three,
kind of,
even the
what are
three
you
of
going to do
these.
about it?
Yeah, I guess they were just trying to say, oh, they're a nonprofit. It wasn't clear to me exactly what they're doing. So the screenshot over here on the upper right side, this is taken from the website, which I guess is still up. And, just reading it, it's just kind of this fluffy stuff. It's not clear to me what they're actually doing. They're not making
Common
it.
sense fixes. That's what they're doing.
They're not providing the services, which I think they have to do. They're a nonprofit. But it seems instead as though their strategy was to like strong arm a very powerful existent industry.
They're looking at new ways to use data and technology.
Yeah. I mean, okay. The other kind of reason HBS said for the reason why they failed was perverse incentives. And this, they sort of, my reading of it just was to say that the medical industry in general said, the more hospital beds that are filled and the more profit is generated. I'm not sure how this related to Haven specifically, just kind of more as a known thing about the medical industry already, but so be it. And then the last reason that HBS gave as to why Haven failed was timing of COVID, which
Of
probably when
course.
you're trying to start something like this, all the power went back to the medical establishment.
I mean, anything can be blamed on COVID, though.
Yeah.
You had a bad day last week. Oh, it's because of COVID.
Except for, drops in mask sales. So what do you think? You think that there's a business opportunity here? Are you excited?
Certainly seems like it. Yeah. No, I mean, this is such an open-ended thing here. It seems like no one's really done or doing anything to make it fundamentally better. So from a very unthoughtful point of view, it sounds like there could be a ton of opportunity there.
Well, I mean, just the costs by themselves should be enough. I think some of the things that just scare people away are, I think, the lobby. It's just, and I'll get kind of more into this in the business model and the business plan side, but it's just fantastically powerful. I think that's just what it is. You got two incredibly powerful industries that you're going to be fighting the government as well as what's already the incumbents
Right.
and laws. Like there are laws probably out there. All of this stuff is not physically. You're not breaking any of the laws of physics here.
Right. You just have such a
But you have a
huge
very,
social system.
you got two
It's been
systems that are
ingrained
designed to keep people like you out from
and
changing
it's just
it.
growing and growing and growing every year.
Yeah. But there is a way. I don't think government is the way to change it. I think the capitalist way of, coming up with a better alternative is the way. But you can't just come in. You can't just go into a corner. You got to take the whole thing. And anyway, I'm excited to share part
You got to
two.
be
I think
bold.
that's really the fun one. That and the business plan, the business model. Well, yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but the thing about the business model is it's wrong. Like what I'm presenting, the numbers that are there is like certainly wrong. But the idea of the business plan is to go and figure out like where it's wrong and kind of like then smooth it out and figure out where it would work. Like it just raises so many really critical questions in the business model that need to be answered by the business plan. But anyway,
Looking forward to it.
yeah, no, I'm looking forward to sharing it.
There's
Who
only
knows?
one place to hear that.
Yeah, I couldn't believe
Right
like
here on the Root of All Evil podcast.
Yeah. All right, guys. Cool. All right. Thanks for signing. Thanks for thanks for clicking the link. I'm Luke.
I'm Joe.
All right. We'll see you
See
next
you next
week.
time.
All right.